Welcome back to Hidden Wasteland Histories. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into one of the most disturbing truths about the Fallout universe. This is a confession that will challenge everything you thought you knew about being the hero in the wasteland. It's going to make you uncomfortable, it's going to make you question your choices, and it might just change how you see these games forever. Let's begin this dark journey through the wasteland's most uncomfortable truth. I need to tell you something before I'm gone. Before the rad sickness takes what's left of my mind, before the nightmares become my only reality. My name is Marcus Delaney, and I worked for the Brotherhood of Steel as a logistics coordinator for Project Purity. I kept records, I tracked numbers, I documented everything, and I know the truth that will destroy you. You think you're the hero of your story, don't you? You emerged from that vault, or that tribe, or that frozen sleep, and you changed the world. You made the hard choices. You saved people. But what if I told you that every single time you thought you were saving the wasteland, you were actually ensuring its destruction? What if the real villain of every Fallout story was staring back at you from the screen? I've spent 23 years documenting the aftermath of Project Purity. 23 years watching what happens when you concentrate the most vital resource in the capital wasteland into the hands of a single military organization. And I've read the reports from out west, from New California, from the Mojave. The pattern is always the same. A hero appears, violence erupts, power concentrates, and the cycle that ended the world begins again. Let me start with something that'll make your blood run cold. Do you remember the Master, the blob of flesh and circuitry from Fallout 1? The one you probably killed without a second thought, convinced you were saving humanity? Here's what they don't tell you in the holotapes. Here's what I found in classified Brotherhood archives, documents salvaged from the ruins of Mariposa military base. The Master's unity would have worked. I'm not talking about the sterility problem, the fact that super mutants couldn't reproduce naturally. Yes, that was a fatal flaw in execution, but the ideology, the core concept, the Master wanted to eliminate the differences that drive humanity to war, to create a unified species that could cooperate instead of destroy. And here's the uncomfortable truth that keeps me awake at night. Even if the unity succeeded, it would have brought an end to the constant cycle of violence that defines post-war humanity. Think about what the wasteland looked like in 2162. Think about what it still looks like now in 2300. Raiders murdering traders, towns slaughtering each other over water, slavers capturing the desperate, the Brotherhood hoarding technology, the Enclave trying to genocide anyone with a hint of radiation exposure, the New California Republic stretching itself into empire. War. War never changes. That's what they told the Vault Dweller, but the Master wanted to change it. He wanted to end war itself by removing the biological and social differences that cause conflict. Was his method horrifying? Absolutely. Would it have required the forced transformation of every human being on the planet? Yes. But answer me this, how many people have died in the Wasteland Wars since 2162? Thousands? Tens of thousands? How many will die in the next century of endless tribal conflicts, factional warfare, and resource battles? The Vault Dweller could have joined the Unity. They could have become part of something that, despite its horrific methods, might have actually prevented more suffering than it caused. Instead, they destroyed the Master and doomed the wasteland to another 2 centuries of fragmented violence. But that's just the beginning. That's the easy one to dismiss because super mutant sterility makes it feel like a doomed plan anyway. Let's talk about something harder to swallow. Let's talk about what you did in Fallout 2. The New California Republic started with noble intentions, founded by Tandy and her father after the Vault Dweller saved Shady Sands. Democracy, rule of law, healthcare, education. For decades under Tandy's leadership, it genuinely tried to rebuild civilization the right way. But then Tandy died. And here's where the Chosen One's victory becomes a curse. By destroying the Enclave and empowering the New California Republic, by making them the dominant force in California, you created a monster Under President Aaron Kimball and his successors, the new California Republic became increasingly imperialistic and expansive, pursuing a foreign policy of expansion by force of arms. They overextended themselves. They started demanding taxes from settlements that never asked for new California Republic protection. They annexed territories through military force. They repeated every single mistake that pre-war America made. If you could go back and let the Enclave win, knowing what the new California Republic would become, would you? Or is pre-war style imperialism better than post-war genocide? The new California Republic's expansion gave way to an imperialist and expansionist political agenda, with the nation's success tied to the continued growth of territory. Does that sound familiar? It should. That's exactly what pre-war America did. Resource imperialism, manifest destiny, endless expansion until the resources ran out and the bombs fell. The chosen one didn't save California. They just restarted the countdown to the next apocalypse. I can see you getting defensive. I can feel you wanting to argue, but stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you about Fallout 3 is going to hurt. I was there. I watched it happen. Project Purity was supposed to save the capital wasteland. The goal was to purify all the water in the tidal basin at once, providing millions of gallons of drinkable water. Noble, right? Beautiful. The lone wanderer sacrificed everything to activate it, to give clean water to a dying world. Except, here's what actually happened. Here's what I documented in my 23 years of logistics work. The Brotherhood of Steel received a powerful economic asset, which Elder Lions used to provide water to all major settlements completely free of charge. Free water! How could that possibly be bad? But then reality set in. The insistence on providing water for free made finding resources and funding incredibly draining, spreading the Brotherhood too thin. So, what do you think happened? I'll tell you what happened. Scribe Bigsley, the man in charge of distribution, had to make a choice: follow orders and watch the operation collapse, or start selling water to keep things running. The entire operation was severely hampered by a general lack of resources and planning. He started selling it, rationing it, deciding who got water and who didn't. And just like that, the Brotherhood of Steel controlled the single most vital resource in the entire capital wasteland. They controlled who lived and who died. They controlled which settlements flourished and which dried up. They created the exact same power structure that the Enclave wanted, just with better public relations. You created a water monopoly. You gave a military organization complete control over survival itself. And you did it thinking you were a hero. The settlements that cooperated with the Brotherhood got water. The ones that didn't? Well, there's only so much to go around, isn't there? We have to prioritize. We have to make tough choices. We have to ensure that water goes to those who support our mission of protecting the wasteland. Does that sound like freedom to you? Or does it sound like the same authoritarian control that every pre-war government claimed was for the greater good? And before you tell me that Elder Lyons was different, that he genuinely wanted to help people, let me remind you of something. After Elder Lyons' death and the reunification with the Outcasts, this trend likely reversed, with Project Purity acting as the backbone of Brotherhood operations and control of the capital wasteland. One generation of noble intentions, and then right back to authoritarian control. If you're still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button, because what I'm about to tell you about New Vegas and Fallout 4 is going to shatter everything you thought you knew about being the hero. You're still here. Good. That means some part of you knows I'm right, even if you don't want to admit it yet. Let me tell you about the Mojave, about what happened when the Courier woke up from a bullet to the brain and decided to play kingmaker with an entire region's future. I obtained copies of the Mojave campaign reports through back channels. The Brotherhood trades information when they need to, and what I read in those reports made me understand something fundamental about every Fallout protagonist. You're not a hero. You're a destabilizing agent. You're the catalyst that forces change through overwhelming violence, and then you walk away before the consequences catch up. Think about New Vegas. Really think about it. At the end, You had to choose who would take control of the wasteland, and almost all options had pros and cons. The new California Republic? We already covered what they became. Caesar's Legion, brutal slavery and crucifixions. Mr. House? A pre-war billionaire dictator who views everyone as variables in his probability calculations. But here's the option everyone thinks is the good ending. Independent Vegas. You kicked everyone out. You installed Yes Man. You became the master of New Vegas yourself. When you chose Independent Vegas, who gave you the right to decide the fate of thousands of people? Did anyone in Freeside vote for you? Did the people of the Strip ask for your intervention? You murdered your way through the Mojave, killed or displaced every major faction, and installed yourself as the new autocrat. And the game calls this independence. Independence from what? From Mr. House's dictatorship? You just replaced one dictator with another. You. You can choose to be a benevolent ruler or a ruthless dictator exploiting resources for your own benefit. But either way, you're imposing your vision on people who never asked for it. The Mojave was complex. It was messy. Factions were negotiating, fighting, surviving. It was chaotic, but it was functional chaos. Then you showed up. And here's what nobody talks about in those ending slides. Here's what happens after the Courier rides off into the sunset, feeling like a hero. Power vacuum. The Courier can't be everywhere at once. They can't manage every settlement, mediate every dispute, protect every caravan. So what happens? They delegate. They create a hierarchy. They build enforcement mechanisms. They become exactly what they replaced. The kings in Freeside? You probably helped them, made them your allies. Congratulations, you just empowered a street gang to act as your enforcers. The boomers at Nellis? You gave isolationist xenophobes control of artillery that can level city blocks. The Brotherhood? If you let them live, you gave technology hoarders the freedom to continue hoarding technology. The Great Khans? You either destroyed a culture or helped them become raiders somewhere else. Every single choice in New Vegas is you picking which group gets to dominate which other groups. There is no liberation. There is only the replacement of one power structure with another. And you're always at the top of that structure, imposing order through violence, just like pre-war governments did. I spent 3 weeks analyzing the casualty reports from the Second Battle of Hoover Dam. Do you know how many people died during your, heroic final push? Thousands. New California Republic troopers with families, Legion soldiers who were enslaved as children and knew nothing else, Brotherhood paladins, Securitron robots that might have been more sentient than we gave them credit for. And for what? So you could decide who controls a dam? So you could impose your personal philosophy on an entire region? The Courier isn't a hero. The Courier is a walking apocalypse who reshapes society at gunpoint and calls it freedom. But at least the Mojave was relatively isolated. At least the consequences were somewhat contained to one region. What happened in the Commonwealth? That's where the pattern becomes undeniable. That's where you can't hide from what you really are. Let me tell you about Fallout 4, about the sole survivor and the 4 endings that all prove the same point. You woke up from cryo, your spouse was murdered, your son was taken, tragic, sympathetic, and then you proceeded to insert yourself into a factional war that you didn't understand, making decisions that would affect hundreds of thousands of lives, all while convincing yourself you were doing the right thing. Let's go through each ending, shall we? You can side with the Institute. In this ending, the Institute cements its dominance over the Commonwealth with numerous synths patrolling and Diamond City decorated with Institute flags. You become the director of an organization that kidnaps people, replaces them with synthetic duplicates, and conducts experiments on the surface population. You become the leader of the faction that everyone in the Commonwealth fears and hates. But hey, they have clean facilities and advanced technology, so it's okay, right? You murdered the railroad. You murdered the Brotherhood. You empowered techno-fascist scientists who view surface dwellers as expendable test subjects, and you did it because you found your son and he asked you to. Or maybe you sided with the Brotherhood of Steel. The Brotherhood ending sees the Institute destroyed along with possibly the Railroad. You helped a military organization obsessed with hoarding technology establish permanent dominance over the Commonwealth. Elder Maxon, who views synths as abominations to be destroyed, ghouls as monsters to be eliminated, and wastelanders as primitives to be controlled. You gave them a giant military airship, power armor, and energy weapons. You made them the dominant military force in the region, and now they patrol the Commonwealth, confiscating technology, demanding compliance, and shooting anything they deem abomination. Congratulations. You created a techno-fascist military state, or perhaps you chose the Railroad, the well-meaning extremists who care about synth rights above literally everything else. If you side with the Railroad, you destroy the Brotherhood along with the Institute. You murdered two major factions, threw the Commonwealth into chaos, all to liberate synthetic beings who may or may not be truly conscious. And after you've blown up the Institute and destroyed the Brotherhood, what then? The Railroad has no plan for governing, no infrastructure, no food production, no water purification. They're a resistance movement that won, and now they have no idea what to do with victory. The Commonwealth descends into raider violence and settlement warfare while the Railroad hides in their church, patting themselves on the back for saving synths. But wait, there's the Minutemen ending, the people's choice. The Minutemen ending destroys the Institute but can avoid killing the other major factions. This is supposed to be the good ending, right? The one where you rebuild a volunteer militia to protect settlements? Except who leads the Minutemen? You do. Who makes all the decisions? You do. Who decides which settlements get protected and which ones are not strategic priorities? You do. You built an army. You gave yourself the title of general. And then you use that army to destroy the Institute, potentially destroy the Brotherhood, and establish yourself as the dominant military power in the Commonwealth. You're not a liberator. You're a warlord with good public relations. In Fallout 4, no matter which faction you chose, you murdered hundreds of people and destroyed at least one major organization. How is that different from what pre-war governments did? How is your violence more justified than theirs? Here's what I realized after years of studying these reports, these patterns. The protagonist of every Fallout game does the exact same thing. They appear from nowhere with no stake in the existing power structures. They choose a side based on personal preference or emotional attachment. They murder their way through everyone who disagrees. They concentrate power in their chosen faction, and then they either leave or install themselves at the top of a new hierarchy. You're not fixing the wasteland. You're perpetuating the exact cycle that ended the world. Pre-war America went to war over resources. You go to war over resources. Pre-war America imposed its vision of freedom on other nations at gunpoint. You impose your vision of the greater good on factions at gunpoint. Pre-war America concentrated power in military and corporate structures. You concentrate power in whichever faction you decided to back. The methods are the same. The justifications are the same. The outcomes are the same. The only difference is that you're doing it on a smaller scale. For now, the new California Republic started with 5 states and 700,000 people by 2241. Within another 40 years, they'd expanded into Nevada, Arizona, and Oregon. Give them another century and they'll control the entire western United States. Then what? Do they stop? Or do they keep expanding, keep demanding resources, keep requiring more territory to feed their growing population? The bombs will fall again. Maybe not nuclear bombs. Maybe it'll be biological weapons this time, or energy weapons, or something we haven't even invented yet. But they'll fall. Because the cycle continues. Because every time someone tries to save the wasteland, they just create the conditions for the next apocalypse. And you're not the solution. You're the catalyst. You're the person who appears at inflection points and tips the balance toward concentrated power and institutional violence. You're midwifing the return of the very systems that destroyed the world. I've watched it happen 4 times now. 5 if you count New Vegas separately. And I'm watching it happen again with whatever crisis emerges next. Because there's always another vault dweller, another chosen one, another courier, another sole survivor. There's always another protagonist who thinks they're different, who thinks they're making the right choices, who thinks that their violence is justified because they have good intentions. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores, because what I'm about to tell you in the final part will make you question every choice you've ever made in these games. You want to know the worst part? The part that keeps me up at night, coughing blood into my pillow as the radiation eats through my lungs? It's that every single protagonist probably believed they were doing the right thing, just like you believed it when you played. The Vault Dweller didn't see themselves as dooming the wasteland to centuries more violence. They saw themselves saving their vault, stopping a monster. The Chosen One didn't think they were creating an imperialist empire. They thought they were stopping genocide and protecting their village. The Lone Wanderer wanted clean water for everyone. The Courier wanted to liberate New Vegas. The Sole Survivor wanted to find their son and make the Commonwealth safer. Good intentions, noble goals, heroic sacrifices, and every single time, the outcome was the same. Power concentrated, hierarchies established, violence normalized. The cycle continued. But let me tell you something that's going to really mess with your head. Something I discovered in the deep archives, in reports that were never meant to see daylight. Sometimes the villains had better plans than the heroes. I'm serious. Sit with that for a moment. The Master, the Enclave, even the Institute. Their methods were horrific, yes, absolutely inexcusable in many ways, but their actual goals, their long-term vision for humanity, sometimes it was more coherent, more sustainable than what the heroes offered. The Master wanted unity, forced, horrible, transformation-based unity, but unity nonetheless. One species, one goal, no more tribal warfare. The Master's vision was to convert everyone into super mutants who would then be united under one banner with no reason to fight. Compare that to what actually happened. The Hub Wars with Shady Sands over trade routes, the New California Republic Wars with the Brotherhood over technology, the Brotherhood Wars with the Enclave over ideology, the Legion Wars with the New California Republic over territory, the Institute Wars with everyone over everything. 200 years after the bombs fell, humanity is still fragmenting, still fighting, still killing each other over the same resources and ideologies that caused the Great War. Would the Master's unity have been better? I don't know, but I know it couldn't have been much worse than what we got instead. Or take the Enclave. Yes, they wanted to release modified forced evolutionary virus into the water supply. Yes, that would have killed almost everyone in the wasteland who had any radiation exposure. Genocide on a massive scale. Absolutely evil. But here's what nobody talks about. President Eden's plan was to control the wasteland through the water supply, establishing dominion by controlling the most vital resource. And you know what? The Brotherhood did exactly the same thing with Project Purity. They just did it slower, more subtly, with better propaganda. The Enclave wanted to kill most people quickly and rebuild with their pure population. The Brotherhood wanted to control most people slowly and reshape society through resource monopoly. One is obviously more evil in execution, but in terms of outcome, both lead to authoritarian control by a militaristic elite who believe they know what's best for humanity. You just help the faction with better marketing. And the Institute. Oh, the Institute is the perfect example. They genuinely believed they were the best hope for humanity, despite being responsible for super mutants in the Commonwealth and kidnapping people over centuries. They were conducting horrific experiments. They were replacing people with synths for reasons that ranged from scientific to paranoid to just plain cruel. But you know what they were also doing? They were maintaining pre-war technology. They were advancing science. They were developing agriculture, medicine, and energy systems that could actually sustain a rebuilt civilization. Their synth technology alone could have revolutionized the Commonwealth if it had been shared instead of hoarded. Instead, you either joined them and became complicit in their crimes, or you destroyed them and eliminated the single most advanced scientific institution in the eastern United States. Either way, you made things worse because that's what you always do. You reduce complex situations to binary choices: good faction versus bad faction, join or destroy, save or condemn. The wasteland isn't binary. The wasteland is complicated, messy, full of factions that are partially right and partially wrong, that have good ideas mixed with terrible execution, that could potentially work together if someone was willing to do the slow, unglamorous work of negotiation and compromise. But you're not interested in that, are you? You're the protagonist. You need clear enemies to shoot, clear choices to make, clear victories to celebrate. So you simplify, you pick a side, you commit violence on a massive scale, and you call it heroism. If you could replay any Fallout game with the goal of minimizing violence and maximizing cooperation between factions, could you even finish the main quest? Or is violence so baked into the structure that being a hero requires being a killer? Let me tell you about something specific, something that happened right here in the Capital Wasteland that exemplifies everything I'm talking about. Do you remember Megaton, the town built around an unexploded nuclear bomb? Early in Fallout 3, you get a quest from a man named Mr. Burke. He wants you to detonate the bomb, destroy the town, kill everyone. Why? Because Alistair Tenpenny wants a better view from Tenpenny Tower. Evil quest. Clearly evil. If you do it, you lose karma, everyone hates you, the game treats it as a villainous choice. But then the lone wanderer can also disarm the bomb, save Megaton, become a hero. Good karma. Everyone loves you. The sheriff gives you a house. You're celebrated as a savior, except here's what actually happens long term. I tracked it. I documented it. Megaton survives, yes, but it remains a tinderbox of social tension. You've got religious fanatics worshipping an unexploded bomb. You've got a weapons dealer supplying raiders. You've got Moriarty exploiting everyone who comes through. You've got desperate people living in rusted metal shacks around a radioactive crater. And most importantly, you've got a town that's completely dependent on scavenging and trading to survive. No agriculture, no industry, no long-term sustainability plan. Just survival. So the town limps along for another few years, maybe a decade if they're lucky. And then what? The scavenge runs out. The trade routes dry up, the social tensions explode into violence, and Megaton collapses anyway, just slower and more painfully than if the bomb had detonated. You didn't save Megaton. You delayed its inevitable death, and you felt good about yourself while doing it. That's the hero fantasy in a nutshell. Short-term salvation with no thought for long-term consequences. Now let me tell you something about myself, something I've been avoiding because it complicates my message, but you deserve to know who's really talking to you. I said I was a logistics coordinator for the Brotherhood. That's true, but it's not the whole truth. Before Project Purity, before the Brotherhood, I was Institute, Bioscience Division. I worked on the synth program. I helped design the algorithms that made Generation 3 synths possible. I believed we were saving humanity. I believed that replacing dangerous individuals with controllable synths would make the Commonwealth safer, more stable, more ready for the Institute to eventually reveal itself and lead humanity forward. I was wrong, obviously. The synth replacement program was morally bankrupt, built on kidnapping and murder. But here's the thing that haunts me. I was trying to help. I genuinely believed I was working toward a better future. And so was everyone else in the Institute. We weren't monsters cackling over our evil plans. We were scientists who convinced ourselves that our methods were justified by our goals. Just like every protagonist convinces themselves that their violence is justified by their intentions. I escaped the Institute before the sole survivor showed up. I couldn't keep lying to myself about what we were doing. I fled to the Capital Wasteland, joined the Brotherhood under a false identity, and spent the next 2 decades trying to understand how so many well-meaning people keep making the same catastrophic mistakes. And what I learned is this: the problem isn't individual evil. The problem is the structure itself. The problem is that the post-apocalyptic wasteland rewards violence, consolidation of power, and authoritarian control. The problem is that trying to save people through force inevitably recreates the systems that destroyed the world in the first place. The Master tried to force unity through biological transformation, failed. The Enclave tried to force purity through genocide, failed. The new California Republic tried to force civilization through expansion and annexation, failing slowly. The Brotherhood tried to force order through technology hoarding and military might, failing slowly. The Institute tried to force progress through secretive scientific control, failed. And you? Every time you play, you try to force your chosen solution through overwhelming violence and personal authority. And it fails too. It always fails. The wasteland might stabilize temporarily, but the underlying problems remain. The cycle continues because the real enemy was never the Master or the Enclave or the Institute or Caesar's Legion. The real enemy is the belief that any individual or faction has the right to impose their vision on others through force, and that's exactly what every protagonist does. You know what's never an option in these games? Genuine democracy, grassroots organization, slow, patient rebuilding of social trust, teaching settlements to cooperate without a military enforcer, developing trade networks based on mutual benefit rather than threat of force. Those things are boring. They don't make for exciting gameplay. There's no climactic battle, no dramatic choice, no satisfying explosion. But they're also the only things that actually work in the long term. The new California Republic started with democratic ideals, with Tandy and Aradesh proposing a republic where states voted to join. And for a while, it worked. When they focused on rebuilding infrastructure, on negotiation rather than conquest, on slow, sustainable growth, they actually made progress. But then, progress wasn't fast enough. Resources weren't abundant enough. So they switched to expansion through force and immediately started repeating pre-war mistakes. The Minutemen in Fallout 4 had the right idea too, originally. They were a volunteer militia helping settlements, not trying to rule anyone. But then they got wiped out. And when you rebuild them as your personal army, with you as the unquestioned general, making all strategic decisions. You took a decentralized mutual aid network and turned it into a hierarchical military force, because that's what works in the game. That's what the structure rewards. And that's my point. That's what I've been trying to tell you. The game itself, the story itself, is designed to funnel you toward authoritarian solutions, toward violence as the answer, toward the concentration of power as the goal. You were never given the option to be anything other than a destabilizing agent who reshapes the wasteland through force. The hero ending doesn't exist. There is no choice you can make that breaks the cycle. There is no faction you can support that won't eventually recreate the problems of the old world. Because the wasteland doesn't need a hero. It needs 1,000 small acts of cooperation, compromise, and community building. It needs people who are willing to do the slow work of rebuilding trust and establishing genuine democratic institutions. But that's not your role. Your role is to be the catalyst, the violent inflection point, the person who kills the old boss and installs the new boss and calls it liberation. I'm dying now. The rad sickness has progressed too far. I've got maybe a week left before my organs shut down completely. And I'm spending that week trying to warn anyone who'll listen. You're not the hero. You never were. Every time you thought you were saving the wasteland, you were actually ensuring its continued degradation. Every time you concentrated power in your chosen faction, you moved one step closer to the conditions that will cause the next apocalypse. War never changes, and neither do you. That's the real tragedy of the Fallout universe. Not the bombs that fell, not the radiation, not the monsters or the raiders or the factions fighting for control. The real tragedy is that humanity keeps producing heroes who make everything worse. I need to tell you one more thing, one final truth that's going to hurt worse than everything else I've said. But first, let me tell you what happened 2 days ago. I was in my quarters at the Citadel organizing my files, preparing to pass on this research before the sickness takes me, and I found something I'd forgotten, a holotape from my time at the Institute, a recording of a conversation between Father and the Directorate, discussing the synth replacement program, and Father said something that made my blood run cold. He said the Commonwealth cannot govern itself. History proves this. They need guidance, structure, control. We provide that, even if they don't understand it. We are saving them from themselves. I've heard that exact justification before, from Elder Lions about Project Purity, from New California Republic commanders about their expansion into the Mojave, from Caesar about his legion, from the Enclave about their purification plan. Every authoritarian in history has used the same excuse. The people cannot be trusted to govern themselves. We must do it for them, for their own good, and every Fallout protagonist enables this. You don't question it. You don't push back. You pick whichever authority figure you like best and help them impose their will on everyone else. You know what the real difference is between you and the raiders you kill? The raiders are honest about what they are. They want to take things and hurt people, and they don't pretend otherwise. But you take things and hurt people and call it heroism. You impose your will through violence and call it liberation. At least the raiders don't lie to themselves about what they're doing. Let me tell you about someone I met in my final months. Her name was Sarah Chen. She lived in a small settlement outside Rivet City. No grand ambitions, no faction allegiance, just trying to grow crops, raise her kids, and maintain trade relationships with her neighbors. I asked her once what she thought about the Lone Wanderer, about Project Purity, about the Brotherhood's control of the water supply. And you know what she said? I don't care who controls the damn water. I care that my children have enough to drink. I don't care which faction wins. I care that the trade routes stay open so I can sell my crops. I don't care about grand visions for humanity's future. I care about whether my neighbors and I can cooperate well enough to defend against raiders. That's what actual people in the wasteland want. Not heroes, not saviors, not grand transformative visions. Just stability, just safety, just the ability to live their lives without some protagonist showing up and burning their world down in the name of progress. But that's not dramatic enough for you, is it? That's not exciting enough. There's no climactic battle in helping farmers establish trade cooperatives. There's no moral complexity in mediating disputes between settlements. There's no satisfying conclusion in spending years slowly building trust between factions. So, you ignore people like Sarah Chen. You dismiss them as non-player characters, as background decoration, as people whose lives don't matter as much as your grand quest. And then you make decisions that destroy their lives, and you never even notice. How many unnamed settlers have died because of your choices in Fallout games? Not the named characters with quests, but the random people living in settlements you helped one faction destroy? Did you ever stop to count? When you sided with the Brotherhood and destroyed the railroad, you killed Deacon, but you also killed dozens of unnamed railroad agents who were trying to free synths, people with families, people with stories, people who believed in something. When you destroyed the Institute, you killed Father, but you also killed hundreds of scientists and their children who lived underground. Were they all complicit in the kidnappings? Some were. But what about the hydroponics specialists just trying to grow food, the teachers educating the children, the engineers maintaining life support? When you let the New California Republic expand into the Mojave, you displaced tribes, destroyed communities, forced people to accept taxation and governance they never voted for. Real people with real lives that you disrupted because you decided the New California Republic was the right choice. And you did all of this without hesitation because the game told you these were acceptable casualties in pursuit of your greater goal. But here's what I've learned after all these years of documentation and research. There is no greater goal. There's no grand narrative of human progress that justifies sacrificing individuals for the collective. There's only people trying to survive, and factions using violence to impose their will, and heroes who pick sides and call it morality. The Master was wrong to force transformation on humanity, but so were you for stopping him without offering any alternative except more fragmented violence. The Enclave was wrong to attempt genocide, but so were you for empowering the new California Republic to become the next imperialist empire. The Institute was wrong to kidnap and replace people, but so were you for destroying the Commonwealth's only chance at advanced scientific progress. There are no good choices in the wasteland. There are only choices that lead to different forms of suffering, and you keep picking violence as the answer because that's the only tool the game gives you. I'm angry. I'm so angry. Not at you specifically, at the pattern, at the cycle, at the fact that we keep producing heroes and those heroes keep making things worse. Do you know what kept the wasteland relatively stable for the first 100 years after the bombs fell? The absence of heroes, settlements traded, raiders raided, people adapted. It was harsh, it was difficult, but it was sustainable. Then the Vault Dweller emerged and destroyed the Master. Power vacuum, chaos. The Brotherhood expanded. The new California Republic formed. Factions began consolidating. Then the Chosen One emerged and destroyed the Enclave. The new California Republic grew into an empire. Expansion, imperialism, resource wars. Then the Lone Wanderer emerged and activated Project Purity. The Brotherhood controlled the water. Dependency, authority, control. Every hero makes the wasteland more centralized, more hierarchical, more dependent on authority figures to maintain order. Every hero moves humanity closer to recreating the exact conditions that caused the Great War. And now I'm going to tell you something that might make you dismiss everything I've said, something that might make you think I'm just another unreliable narrator with an agenda. I lied to you, not about the facts, those are all true, but about why I'm telling you this. I said the radiation sickness is killing me. That's true, but it's not natural radiation exposure. 3 weeks ago, I was approached by someone from a faction I can't name. They offered me a choice. They showed me projections, data models, probability calculations about where the wasteland is heading. And the models all showed the same thing. Within 50 years, maybe less, the major factions will grow large enough and strong enough that conflict between them will be inevitable. The new California Republic will push too far east. The Brotherhood will refuse to share technology. Whatever emerges from the Commonwealth will clash with existing power structures. And when that happens, the weapons will come out. Not nuclear weapons maybe, but biological weapons, energy weapons, synth armies, whatever technology each faction has developed in secret. Another apocalypse, smaller scale maybe, but another collapse. Another die-off, another reset, unless someone breaks the cycle. This faction, the one that approached me, they had a plan, a radical plan. They wanted to disseminate this information, these recordings, these documents. They wanted people to understand the pattern, to see that the hero model doesn't work, that concentrated power always leads to catastrophe, and they wanted someone with credibility to deliver the message, someone who had worked for both the Institute and the Brotherhood, someone who could speak with authority about the failures of every major faction. They injected me with radiation 3 weeks ago. Enough to kill me slowly, enough to give me time to make these recordings, but not enough time to reconsider or back out. I'm not a martyr. I'm not a hero. I'm a weapon, a propaganda tool, someone else's pawn in another game of factional chess. But here's the thing that's kept me recording anyway. Even after I figured out what they did to me, even after I understood I was being manipulated, everything I've said is still true. The pattern is real. The cycle is real. The heroes do make things worse. Concentrated power does lead to catastrophe. The wasteland does keep producing protagonists who reshape the world through violence and call it salvation. So yes, I'm biased. Yes, I'm being used. Yes, there's an agenda behind these recordings. But the facts don't care about my agenda. The data doesn't change because I have ulterior motives. The pattern exists whether I'm a reliable narrator or not. And that's the most terrifying part. The truth is so obvious, so well documented, so historically consistent that even a dying man being used as a propaganda tool can present it accurately. You're not the hero, you never were, and the next time you pick up a Fallout game, the next time you emerge from a vault or wake from cryo or survive a bullet to the brain, you're going to do it again. You're going to pick a faction. You're going to commit violence. You're going to concentrate power. You're going to restart the cycle. Because that's what the game is designed for. That's what the structure demands. That's what makes it fun to play. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's just a game. Maybe none of this matters because it's pixels on a screen, stories in a fictional universe, entertainment with no real-world consequences. But I wonder sometimes. I wonder if the stories we tell ourselves matter. I wonder if playing heroes who solve problems through violence affects how we think about real-world problems. I wonder if the fantasy of being the one special person who can fix everything through force of will is actually training us to accept authoritarian solutions in our own lives. I wonder if Fallout is just reflecting human nature, or if it's reinforcing it. And I wonder what would happen if someone tried to play differently, if someone tried to finish a Fallout game by negotiating instead of shooting, by building coalitions instead of picking sides, by establishing democratic institutions instead of concentrating power. I wonder if the game would even let you. Sarah Chen died yesterday. Raiders attacked her settlement while the Brotherhood was busy securing technology from a vault. Not enough soldiers to protect everyone. Priorities had to be set. Her settlement wasn't strategic. She died because the lone wanderer gave one faction too much power. She died because resources got concentrated instead of distributed. She died because the hero model doesn't scale. You can't be everywhere. You can't save everyone. And when you concentrate power in institutions, those institutions always prioritize their own survival over individual lives. I'm recording this from her house. The raiders took everything valuable and burned the rest. I found her daughter's body in the root cellar. She was 11 years old. Her name was Maya. She wanted to be a traitor when she grew up. She died so you could feel like a hero. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It's the only way I know you liked the video. I'll be dead before this recording is disseminated. Whatever faction manipulated me into making it will use my words for their own purposes. They'll edit it, remix it, deploy it as a weapon against whichever faction they're fighting, and the cycle will continue. Because that's what always happens. Information becomes ammunition, truth becomes propaganda, and everyone becomes a tool in someone else's game. But maybe, just maybe, someone listening to this will think twice before they pick up a controller and decide to save the wasteland. Maybe someone will ask themselves what they're really doing when they concentrate power in a faction. Maybe someone will wonder if there's a better way. Probably not. But maybe. The wasteland doesn't need heroes. It needs gardeners. People willing to do the slow work of planting seeds, nurturing growth, building networks of mutual support. People who understand that lasting change takes generations, not explosions. But gardeners don't make for good games. There's no boss battle in teaching people to read. There's no achievement for mediating a trade dispute. There's no dramatic ending to establishing a community farm cooperative. So we keep making games about heroes, and we keep playing them, and we keep reinforcing the idea that violence and concentrated power are the solutions to complex problems. And 200 years from now, when the next bombs fall, when the next apocalypse happens, when humanity destroys itself again, we'll wonder how it happened. We'll forget that we trained ourselves to think this way. We'll forget that we told ourselves stories where violence was always the answer. We'll forget that we celebrated heroes who made everything worse. War never changes, and neither will we. This is Marcus Delaney, former Institute scientist, former Brotherhood logistics coordinator, former believer in heroes and salvation and the power of good intentions to override bad methods. I was wrong about everything, and so are you. The recording ends here, but the cycle continues. It always continues, unless you choose to see it differently, unless you choose to stop being the hero.